Hello! Welcome back to another week of Saturday Morning Stories. My name is Ian. Thanks so much for coming. This week, we are going to read a story about a story. It is called Just a Story by Jeff Mack. Just a Story by Jeff Mack, which looks to me like it takes place in a library. This is just a story. A story about a boy. But I think some interesting stuff is going on in this library. Notice anything interesting? A boy who was almost captured by pirates. A boy just reading his book, but he's about to be captured by pirates. And then, what happens next? The pirates see something in the tree growing in the library. Almost eaten by a lion. Scaring off the pirates, but not the boy who's reading his book. And then almost trampled by a herd of wild elephants. Scaring off the pirates and the lion, but not the boy who's reading his book. And then almost stomped on. What could that be? Scaring off the elephants, and it looks like the lion and the pirates are exploded away by the big baby dragon. Look at that. Even bigger than the herd of wild elephants. Bigger than the library itself. Look at this big baby dragon towering over the boy who's reading his book. And then almost squished. What could be so much bigger than the big baby dragon? What do you think it is? You ever seen anything so big and blue? By a belly flopping blue whale. Look at the dragon. And the lion and the elephants and a little bit of a pirate. And we have a tiny little boy reading his book. And then, oh, this book gets crazy now. The boy was almost carried away by an alien with a tractor beam and an Elvis wig flying a spaceship high above the clouds. Give you a close look at that alien. You see the alien in the spaceship? Soaking up all of this stuff that's been in our story. And then the boy who's now upside down reading his book worst of all, you ever read a book like this when you have to flip it upside down? This story is crazy. Worst of all, what could be worse than that? Almost. What is that, a frog? Frog with a wand? Kissed by a frog? The boy is squirming. He can't believe what's about to happen. But not quite. Because the frog falls through a hole in the floor. Actually, there was nothing to worry about. Know why? Why do you think? We're back in the library. Because this is just a story. Look at all that stuff ready to come out for the next person who reads this story. Just a story by Jeff Mack. That was pretty silly, right? But it's a good story about stories, which are obviously my favorite thing. This next story is, sometimes we talked about that Saturday morning, that's a time when we like to do fun things and spend time with our family, but also sometimes you have to do chores like cleaning. This next book is called Tidy by Emily Gravett. And it is a story about cleaning outside, which can get a little tricky. So check in and see what it is like to clean outside. Tidy by Emily Gravett. And I think that is a badger. Deep in the forest lived a badger named Pete, who tidied and cleaned and kept everything neat. He tidied the flowers by checking each patch and snipping off any that didn't quite match. He tidied the fox by grooming his fur. He untangled each knot and each twig and each burr. He tidied the birds from the big to the small by brushing their beaks and then bathing them all. You see in the bird bath. Oh, sorry, can't turn this page. There we go. He picked up stray sticks. He swept and he rubbed. He polished the rocks and he scoured and he scrubbed. What do you think? Does that make sense? To be vacuuming outside, scrubbing the rocks? The other animals, the lion and the bunny, are like, what are you doing? So when a leaf fell, well, what is Pete going to do when a leaf falls? I think more than one is going to fall. And look at Pete. Pete tidied up a mountain of garbage bags with no leaves in sight. But still he wasn't happy. Now the trees looked bare and scrappy, and so, to make it all look neat, Pete undertook a mighty feat. It's not clean enough for Pete. He dug up every single tree. But then it rained. There was a flood. And afterward, a lot of mud. Without the trees, do you think that makes there be more mud? Pete called in the diggers. He called in the mixers. He called in the concrete, the rakers, the fixers. Pete's digger says tidy on it. Because Pete loves to make things tidy. No mud, no leaves, no mess, no trees. Perfectly tidy and perfectly neat. This forest is practically perfect, said Pete. What do you think? Does neat mean perfect? I'm hungry, he thought. I deserve a treat. So he hunted around for something to eat. But the beetles and worms that he usually found were under the concrete, deep in the ground. And so Pete decided to go home instead. If he couldn't have dinner, he'd go straight to bed. But when he arrived, he took out his key. There wasn't a door where the door used to be. Look at that. All the food and his bed and his home, all under the layer of concrete. That made everything so neat. Later that night, Pete tossed and he turned. His belly was empty. It rumbled and churned. As he lay in his mixer, because he can't go to his bed, wide awake, he started to think, I've made a mistake. So, the very next morning, when it got light, he set about trying to put everything right. Look at that. He's breaking up the concrete with the help from, what is that, maybe a woodpecker? And, of course, a bunny with a jackhammer. Then the animals came, from the strong to the weak. They lent him a paw, or a claw, or a beak. We're bringing back the trees, going back into the dirt. Get a close look at all the animals who are helping. They put everything back as it always had been, but maybe less ordered and not quite as clean. And Pete? Well, he promised to tidy up less, but if he succeeded is anyone's guess. What do you think that looks like? The forest the way that it used to be? Pete threw away his one scrubber brush, but he still likes to clean, I think. He's got his brush and his spray bottle behind his back. And the book is for Pat and Grace. And look, Pete can't help but just vacuum up some of the words of the book. I love these paintings. Tidy. So that book is also pretty silly. It's about cleaning outside, which I think you have to keep in reason. And I think that book is going to be about fall, which is coming up in the next season. So anybody else like fall? It's probably my favorite season, and I'm ready for it after all this heat we've been having. Thanks so much for coming to Saturday Morning Stories, and we'll see you next time.